And you're cracking the cash flow code. And my guest today is Mike Conrad. Mike is the CEO and founder of Aqueous Technologies. And we are going to talk about marketing and sales. But we're going to start off in a different place. We're not going to mush the two together. We're going to take them apart. So let's bring Mike on and we'll start the conversation. Hey, Mike, how are you today?
I'm well, Josh. How are you?
Good. And you're also a repeat offender, if I'm not
I
mistaken.
I am. Yeah, I guess I didn't do a good enough job the first time, so the judge ordered me back on your show the second time.
Yeah, well,
So
way
I'll try and
you
do
don't
better.
become a repeat offender unless you're a good guest, so
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I'll take that compliment. Thank you.
and that means that we're in for a good episode, and we're gonna get lots of knowledge today. So, Mike, let's start out with, my favorite place, which is what is the difference between marketing and sales?
Well, some may disagree and they may wordsmith that a little too much, but from my perspective, marketing is a leveraged effort. It's a broad effort. It's an effort to influence decisions. It's an effort to provide factual information, in our case, education. And sales is a one to one, unleveraged um, effort to take that marketing and funnel it down to a decision. Um, to me, that's the difference. Um, I think sales, as formally defined, as traditionally defined, uh, is dead the way we defined it historically. I think sales
What is the way we defined it historically?
well, I think sales is um, traditionally overcoming objections and you can get all these books about how to close a sale and in
Yeah.
three easy steps or whatever. And I think that sales has gone from the seller to the purchaser. The purchaser sells themselves if the marketing is right, if the pre-work has been done. Um, it's kind of hard to describe without sounding a little bit nuts, but the today's world of self-education, of Google, of YouTube, of influencers, of social media, uh, all that has changed the way, at least from my perspective. Like this is just the world according to Mike. It doesn't mean I'm right. Um, from my perspective, has changed the world. We no longer convince people to buy our product. We don't convince them through tricks, through scripting, through overcoming objections and all this stuff. Um, in our case, we convince them by making our message relevant to their life, to their business life, to their personal life, depending what we're trying to quote unquote sell them. We need to be
I
relevant.
Yeah, I
Mhm.
think you're right on the money there. One of my big complaints with sales is people sell features, not benefits. In other words, they don't talk about what's the problem we solve. They talk about the stuff that solves those problems. And for years and years and years, people sold features and they were supposed to sell benefits, but never get around to it. Uh,
Well, yeah, you're absolutely right. You know, for someone to buy, I live in a very niche world, right? I'm not consumer sales. We're definitely business to business. We sell a very obscure, very niche product, and a very high tech product to the high tech industry. Yet it's still classic. We're still solving a problem. The product we make solves a problem. Our challenge is our customers generally don't understand why they're having their problem, and there's no dotted line that connects their problem to our solution because they don't really understand their problem. It's very technical. And so for us to um, market or try and sell our product, what we used to do was very traditional. What we used to do was show pictures of our machine, advertise in magazines, send email blasts, go to trade shows with gimmicks surrounding us and waterfalls in the booth and just crazy stuff to get people to stop and look. And um, and we would talk about we build cleaning equipment, so it for the electronics industry. So we talk about how big our pumps are and how fast our computer is and how big the blower is for drying and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, ad nauseum. And customers would just look with a blank stare and go, "Is that good? I don't know." You know, it because they didn't understand, and nor should they. And it came the realization came to us that we're selling a product that nobody knows they need, and we need to concentrate on the problem and the solution before we can even talk about our equipment, because our equipment means nothing without context, and we lacked all the context. So 1 year after 20 years in business, I can't say I'm a fast learner. I do learn, but I'm not fast. And because, it's they say the enemy of great is good. Jim Collins said that
Yes.
in his book. The enemy of great
Yeah.
is good. And, why leave the safety and security of good for the risk of going great, right? It may not work. So we were doing okay. We were doing good. But one day we had a big trade show, and we had a 30-foot wide by 15-foot high waterfall in our booth, full length of the booth. And it dropped. It was like a giant inkjet printer. It dropped water droplets from the air that formed words and images as they fell.
Oh,
Okay, you can kind
cool.
of picture that. It was really cool.
Yeah.
And the morning before the show opened, these shows are, pretty well back in the day anyway, not so much now because everyone's walking around with a camera, but they were like no photography unless you get permission from the exhibitor. So
Right.
someone came up and said, "Your booth is really cool," and I felt good. And he said, "Can I take a picture of it?" I'm like, "Of course you can." And then he goes, um, "Is there any way I noticed your equipment's on wheels? Any way you can move your equipment out of the way so I can get a better picture of your waterfall?" And it just hit me like, what are we doing where we're attracting people to waterfalls? We don't make waterfalls. We rented that for $35,000, for
Right.
2.5 days. And that was the eureka moment where I realized we're doing this all wrong. It's not about gimmicks and pump sizes and sexiness of our equipment, and it's about problems, solutions. It's about solutions to problems. It's about education. That was the last show we did. That was 10 years ago. And
Yeah, I really question whether trade shows actually make sense for anybody, but that's a different conversation.
yeah, I
There's a
think they
book
do.
out
There's a time when you have to pay your dues, and that's part of it, when trade shows are there, but they're not the same exclusivity as they used to be, right? Right. They don't have that you got to do a show if you want to be anyone, because now you have other alternatives. You have the internet, you have
right.
video, you have podcasts, you have all this other stuff. But we realize that we're selling wrong. We're we were doing very traditional sales. We are good, they are bad, win lose, and it was braggadocious, it was arrogant, it was tacky, and it was common. And we thought, okay, we're done. So we stopped advertising. We haven't advertised traditionally advertised. We haven't paid for a banner ad or a print ad or anything like that in 10 years. We switched to an education model. Yes, everything is marketing. Everything you do is sales and marketing. Everything from the guy that puts a product in a box and tapes it up to anyone that answers the phone. I mean, the whole world is sales and marketing, but not the way it used to be. In our case, we switched to education because
So
educated people make educated choices.
so there's two things that sort of just crossed my mind. One is I'm a big fan of a book called The Challenger Sale. And the Challenger Sale, very simply, a salesperson, instead of building rapport and, talking about all the good stuff, they challenge their customers to think differently about a problem that they solve. And then they bring a solution for that thinking differently to the table, which is something I'm assuming that you guys are probably doing as a sales strategy these days. And the second thing is my definition of sales and marketing is sales creates customers and marketing creates awareness of who you are. And once you get
Yeah,
awareness, then you start going down that path of creating customers along the way. Does that make
yeah,
sense to you?
yeah, absolutely. Marketing allows a potential consumer to consider themselves potentially to be a customer. So, so you have to have the marketing to build the awareness so someone can even consider becoming a customer. Um, Definitely. Sales is, I think it's kind of like, in the delivery world, they talk about last mile delivery, right? Sales is last mile delivery.
Yeah,
And marketing is the 99 miles before that.
right.
Um, and but I think what I've realized, at least in our case, again, world according to Mike, no one made me king. Um, to carry out the analogy of delivery, in our world, the last sale is not us walking the last mile. It's the customer walking toward us the last mile. The customer makes the delivery, in essence, if that makes sense.
Well,
We're not
but
delivering, we're not closing the customer. We're not doing that. The customer is convincing themselves at that point.
so so what your customer is doing, your customer is buying and not being sold.
That's great. You see, you put it so much better. That's why I'm the guest and you're the host, right? That's the perfect way to put it. Yes, yeah, they are buying. We're not selling. So our job is to clear the deck. It's to unclutter all the BS stuff that's out there and clear a path to the vision of what our product does and get all the nonsense out of the way. That's our job.
Yeah,
And
so
present a clear and convincing case that our product is a solution to their problem. The customer does the buying. You're absolutely right.
right, right. So let's talk about the website design for a minute or two, because here's the thing that I find websites do not sell. Websites create legitimacy for who you are. And if somebody's considering buying from something from you, first thing they're going to do is check out your website or Google you and then go to your website because that links to your website. But the truth is your website talking about the problems that you solve and providing the sort of information that a potential customer would want to find before they make a buying decision? Or are you just talking about how wonderful you are and all the cool stuff your stuff does and not talking about your customer and what the problem is they're facing so they can self identify whether you're the right place to be in the first place? Does that make sense?
Yeah, perfectly. I'm an advertising guy. When I was even young in my 20s, I'd be flying, I'd buy magazines because they had no in-flight entertainment back then.
Right.
And I would go through all the ads first.
Yeah.
I've always been interested in advertising in a classical sense. And I find most websites, not just our industry, just in general, and most advertising, um, good humor. I like to poke fun at a lot of it because it's just a reflection of society 20 years ago.
Yeah.
It's very slow to catch up. It's not everybody. Some are very, very clever. Apple was very, very clever back in their day. And of course they've changed their mantra too. They don't bash competitors so much anymore as they used to. They've gone to a higher level. But a website, in my opinion, should be a reflection or an amplification of your marketing principles. So if your marketing principles, as in our case, are education, um, our website needs to reflect that and even amplify that. It needs to be a conduit to that. So on our website, um, there's links to probably 150 videos, you know, well organized. It's not just video overwhelm. But there are links to our podcast that we do, Reliability Matters. There's links to our tips and tricks series that we produce every month. There's links to our Tech Tuesday series that are technical webinars that we do every month. Um, there are videos on how our equipment works. There's all sorts of educational materials. There's white papers and links to symposiums and events that we're doing in the educational world. It's and there are specs on our equipment, obviously, because that's where you have to go for that. But it's not all about selling. It's not at all really to do with selling. It is a place for our educational efforts to land, and it's a portal to continue that philosophy of sales through education. And I've seen other companies that are starting to pick up on that mantra. It's not that we invented it, but other companies are starting to do that within our space. But their websites are still controlled by their advertising, their marketing people, and they're still a bit of a time machine. They haven't really caught up.
Yeah. There's a book out there, and it's actually it's sort of an old book these days. I think it's 10, 12 years old, by a guy named Marcus Buckingham, who owned a pool company. I don't know if he still owns it, but he now is one of HubSpot's biggest agencies. And the book's title is They Ask You Answer. And he says, what he used to do with his pool company is he had a 20-minute video which answered the main questions that people would ask before they bought a pool. And before he'd send a salesperson out, the potential customer had to watch the video. So when the salesperson went out, he had an informed customer instead of an uninformed customer who really didn't know what the right questions were to ask in the first place. And I kind of think that's genius.
Yeah. Sometimes we have to educate the customer just so they can ask us the right questions. They don't know what they don't know.
Yeah,
And we know what they don't know.
it's
And
true.
it's a fine balance not to come across as teachy, preachy, teachy. We understand there's no reason they should know.
Right.
There's no judgment. But there still is, most of our customers are scientists and engineers, and they earn that title through a lot of hard work and
They do.
education. So we need to tread carefully and with a great degree of sensitivity, because we can't just tell them, you don't know this. Let us be your expert. I like to practice what I've coined as guided discovery.
Yeah.
We present information, they have the aha moment. It's their discovery, and we're just the guide,
Uh, I,
rather
I,
than telling them what the answer is.
yeah. I believe this is true inside a company and outside a company, is the people who are doing the work in your company are the experts at their job. And your customers and potential customers are experts on what they need or what they want. And if we can help them discover what it is they want in a way that's respectful, you're likely to have people waiting to do business with you.
Yes, we are a safe harbor for information,
Yeah,
and um, I think our company's 30 years old, so it's not like we were born smart. We've figured out all the ways that don't work, and stumble across
well,
things that do work, and then perfect that. So, but our customers trust us, and one of the reasons they trust us, Josh, is we put so much emphasis on education. We even in our own webinars, technical webinars, we don't even talk about our equipment. We talk about best practices. We talk about problems and solutions. We don't even generally show pictures of our machine. Rarely will we, but we don't show it with any salesy mentality. Our job during that moment is to educate. Now, are we naive? Are we Pollyannish? No, obviously, this is an effort to gain relevance, legitimacy, so we can make money selling equipment. At the end of the day, that's the goal, but it's
yeah.
not the goal in the moment. And I think
So,
when you
so
take
Mike,
that, Mhm. Yeah,
I want to, we only have a couple minutes left, and I'd like to switch
well, I
topics
could talk
just
for
really
4 more hours,
quickly.
Josh. Hours and hours. We can keep
Yeah,
going.
well,
This could
we
be a
only
mini
go for
series.
only about 24 minutes, and that's
There we go. No problem.
So let's talk about the difference between buying generations. I mean,
Oh,
and that's something I think is a big deal that, especially us old folks who've been around for a while, get wrong a lot is that we think that people buy like we buy when they have a whole different mindset. What are you finding out there these days?
you are correct. There are at least a couple of classes of buyers, um, and it's changing rapidly. We have in our industry what we've coined, or I'm sure others have too, the silver tsunami. It's the graying out of the industry, and guys like us are looking at vacation homes and on the beach somewhere, and less at our businesses, and younger people are coming up through the ranks and are now in the decision making mode, right? They've been promoted to decision makers within their company. They, you and I, you and I are exceptions. The fact that we're on a podcast together makes us an outlier. But the typical, I'm 62, the typical 62-year-old is not on social media to a great extent. They're not influencers to any great extent. Um, they tend to buy more traditionally. They want the salesman in their office with the line cards in their trunk and all that. They meet in the conference room. Um, no one much younger than that does anything like that. They buy. They're not sold to use your great analogy, and and they like to self educate. They like to go search the web and find the answers, and it's part of how they learn. And frankly, that's how I learn. I'm self-educated, dropped out of college all these years ago, and figured I'd just learn myself. And I don't know if that was successful or not, but that's me. So I think because I think that way, I I tend to think everyone thinks that way, which is wrong. But there's a huge difference. But who's our future? Our future is not you and I, Josh. We're retiring, sometime in the near future. The future are the younger people. That's who we have to build a company to serve, not leaving folks like us behind. There still has to be an element of, we still have a fax machine. I don't know why, but we still have a fax machine for the people who like to fax us stuff. We still will send a salesperson out if they want us to, even though 95% of people look at our online material and prefer not to see us, prefer to learn, the way they like to learn. We still have a way to service the traditional folks, but the traditional folks are a small minority compared to the new tradition, which is the younger people, and that is who we are building a company to serve, because that's who is going to represent the majority of our business. And and at some point they'll become the silver tsunami, and they'll be, you know beam me up Scotty ways
Being
to sell, and
another
we'll
generation with
figure out what
another
that
thought
is.
process.
Absolutely. And then I'll someone who takes over my position will be on a podcast with someone who took over your podcast and talk about how wrong we were, how wrong we are by doing things the way we're doing it now. Yeah, everything evolves.
I'm not sure that's true because I've been doing this now for about 7 years. And the folks who really are good at what they do, the best practices have been the same best practices that were in place 40 years ago when I first got in the business. And they're pretty much the same today. We dress it up a little bit differently. We have different technology. But at the end of the day, it's respect, personal responsibility, treat your customers with respect, um, support the rights of others to be thinking about the way they do. Don't make other people wrong. Don't scream at people. All that sort of stuff that was best practices 40 years ago is still today.
You're correct.
You
Those are
mentioned
fundamentals.
something. You mentioned something a little bit a while ago. I just want to end on this note because I think it's a really big deal. I've been doing this now for about 45 years. I'm a little bit older than you, Mike. I just turned 70. So,
Congratulations.
but the truth is, what I have learned over the years is business people tend to be pretty bad till they're about 50. And the reason is business people as a group don't get a lot of advice. They don't take a lot of classes. They don't get coaching. They just kind of figure it out themselves. And those who stick around for 25 years or so have made enough mistakes. They finally stop making the stupid mistakes. Or the book I just read says, stop doing stupid shit. And that is, just basically the way life is. And you've obviously learned that, Mike. So unfortunately, we're out of
Process of
time. We could go
elimination,
on
right?
for a lot longer. And
Right.
I'm sure folks
Process
are
of
going to be
elimination.
interested in finding you. So how do they do that?
Easiest way is mike@mikeconrad.com. That's Conrad with a K.
Okay, cool. And Mike's a repeat offender, as I said at the beginning, and the information that he brought today was great. I've got two things I'd like you to do. The first is I'd like you to go wherever you're listening to this podcast and give us an honest rating and review. And while you're there, subscribe. We've been doing this for a little bit over 7 years now. I think we're going up on episode 380 pretty soon. We're going to get to 400 this year. And the second thing is I've been doing a newsletter for 45 years. For about the last 20 years, it's been electronic, online. Every Tuesday morning at 9 o'clock it comes out. I call it Josh's Musings. Sometimes it's just musings about, getting older in business and being relevant. And sometimes it's about how to hire that perfect person that you need in your team. Really easy to get. You just go to www.sustainablebusiness.co/newsletter. That's www.sustainablebusiness.co/newsletter. And you'll get it. Just give me your first name and email address. And next Tuesday at 9 o'clock, you'll get your first edition. So this is Josh Patrick. We're with Mike Conrad. We're at Cracking the Cash Flow Code. Thanks a lot for stopping by. I hope to see you back here